pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I read the minutes, reviewed them, and they're fine. Take a motion.
Move that we approve the minutes of March the 23rd, 2016.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. First order of business, NACC number 93, 660 Great Pond Road.
So this is the annual renewal of their small project farm permit. We did get an annual report sort of summing up last season. Last season, I think this is also the time when you get to meet the farmers. So last season you met Emily Strong. Is Emily here tonight too, or?
I fear she went to a different location, even though I sent her new one.
Oh,
So
okay.
I thought she was
But
coming.
this year there's going to be a second farmer. They only farmed a portion of the fields last year. So.
Questions, Jim?
None.
And I know the new farmer has some concerns about soil that they'd like to discuss too.
Okay.
No question.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dan Berube. Thanks for taking the time to see me tonight. My only concern was based on the original approval letter from 2002 from
2012.
2012. Yeah, that's right. 2012 was a fertilizer restriction of a 534. And that would be really restrictive based on the current soil tests that I've got for this land. I don't know if you guys received those, but I do have them here. I can pass them along. That wouldn't allow, the soil needs a lot of work. The pH is about 2 points too low. It's got some serious deficiencies as far as potassium and phosphorus, and based on if I were to apply that fertilizer in a level to balance out the needed potassium, you'd have an incredible, you'd have far too much phosphorus in the soil, or vice versa. If I just balance out the phosphorus level, there would still be a major potassium deficiency in the soil. So it's just looking for a little leeway to use several other organic fertilizers to balance the specific minerals needed. And I would certainly adhere to the recommended limits from UMass that are on the soil tests as far as optimal levels. Fertilizer is expensive. I have no financial reason to try to get those numbers any higher than the recommended levels.
I think we'd also have to speak to the planning board for the watershed protection, just because in that zone and at all of Rolling Ridge, any of the orders or decisions you've received to restrict use of fertilizers, the ones allowed on the property in general are low nitrogen and phosphorus free. So I think that's even probably more restrictive.
So let me just put it in perspective. Part of it is right from the watershed study that was done many years ago in showing that there was a problem with nutrient loads in Lake Pacheco with a lot of supply. Those generic prohibitions of fertilizers and phosphorus high nitrogen fertilizers were first implemented, and we've adhered to them pretty strongly. But just as of this afternoon, the EPA finally has issued, thank you for forwarding it, but we had already gotten it yesterday. They've issued EPA has issued the statewide general permit for the MS4 program. It won't go into effect officially till July 1 of 17, not this coming July, but next July. But thing of note, is that North Andover isn't a TMDL for phosphorus, total maximum daily load for phosphorus, and it being in our drinking watershed and being directly adjacent to it, I think phosphorus is an issue, and now and will be for years to come. So I'd like to hear other ideas. I'd like to hear the science that you might want to use to maybe contain it within an area without minimizing runoff and without maximizing the impacts, leaving the site. I'm not sure how that's done, but maybe you can amend soil and keep it local and not have it move through.
Well, that's certainly the plan. I mean, you don't spread fertilizer so it can go off the plot. It's not going to help your plants there. I mean, right now we're looking at below optimal levels of phosphorus in that soil itself. The fertilizer that 534 that's inorganic, that's what we would call ProGrow, which has nitrogen, is the 5% nitrogen, the 3% phosphorus, and the 4% potassium. As far as the phosphorus, I'd recommend going with a soft phosphorus rock that's actually 030, so it's still the same. So that same percentage of phosphorus, it's just a slower release, so it kind of builds up the soil a little better. I could get you some more information on that. There's also bone char, which gives you a little bit more. That's a 016, so maybe that might not be something that we want to do, but I think that slow phosphate rock is going to, I think, would address your needs. And the good part about that is if you're concerned with nitrogen, there's no nitrogen in that. We don't have really good nitrogen tests available from UMass. Nitrogen levels in soil change all the time. I'm not according to what I would like to spread, I'm not looking at putting any nitrogen in the soil right now. So it's really just, as far as the phosphorus, I'm really just looking at to get up into the optimum farming range. Right now, we've got 4.2 parts per million phosphorus on one of the fields, and then the other one is 3.1. The optimum range for UMass is between 4 and 14. So, when we're talking about 3/4 of an acre of land. You're talking about soils that need about 18 pounds of phosphorus spread over 3/4 of an acre to bring this into, optimal farming conditions. We're not talking about a huge amount of any sort of fertilizer spread. And then after that, I would like to set up a lot of these beds as permanent beds, so we're not tilling constantly. That's more work for me. That riles things up in the soil, and that's not something I want to do a ton of either. Also, since we're just renovating the soil this year, it's not really growable this year. So this year would be sort of fertilize, lime, till, plant a cover crop of clover, and just let that sit and let the soil do its thing, and then come back, test it, see where we're at in the fall before we even try to do anything else. So I'd be testing the soil twice a year, in the spring and in the fall, to see where we're at. If you'd like, I only have 3 extra copies, but I could give you the copies of the soil reports if you'd like them.
Just submit the one to the record, and
Yep.
Jen can distribute it.
I think you've sent it to me
Oh,
via
okay,
email, but
just in case.
oh, do you? Okay.
Did you have any more questions on that, Jeff?
I guess the only question I have is, were we able to get, we have a resident farmer on our commission, and were we able to get any opinions from Al on this question?
Well, I can't weigh in outside the public meeting anyway, but, I don't know how much you read the agenda and didn't, knowing he wasn't
Okay.
going to be here.
No input?
Well,
Okay.
the request about the soils just came in today, so he wouldn't have seen that anyway.
No comment.
But I do think that we have to talk to planning. This isn't just a conservation issue. they would have to approve too, since this is watershed.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound negative, because I think this is always a great opportunity to get that farm established and get it productive. What's before us is really to renew the small project permit, which I think, I'm certainly inclined to consider with the conditions that are in place right now, but leave the door open for discussion on this soil amendment discussion.
Is it possible, Jennifer, to separate the two plots? Because last year, Emily Strong in the Giving Garden already did some work, so it's in the middle of the plot, and the two that Dan's working on has not been worked on for 2 years. Emily's here.
That's why I thought that was.
I mean, I don't think you have the ability to use both if they approve, but
Okay.
the issue would be the fertilizer and whether that would be allowed. So I don't think there's any need to separate them per se.
I wouldn't. Like he says, he's not even thinking about farming. I think the information from the fertilizer aspect of the permit, because you're working a plant, and then we can come back for modification on a small project. Is there such an animal, Sean?
Well, modification to the condition. Modification to this particular condition
Right.
makes sense, if that's what we are so inclined to consider, sure. But, I think the operation, I don't mind saying the operation's been successful. It's been well managed, well contained. Some of the concerns we had initially never came to be, so I think it's a good operation.
Yeah, because I don't want to hold up the other parts that they already found, because that's not going to be.
Right, certainly what I'm talking about should just apply to me, and, shouldn't affect anything that she's doing, because that's a separate project, and I shouldn't speak for her, so.
Sean?
No questions.
Doug?
No questions.
All right, so direction, we should approve you think we should approve the small project, and then when he comes with planning, and we should have the data what he wants to do.
Yeah, we could just put it on to if the need to modify the condition to the small project.
Right. Yeah. Okay. With that being said, any motion?
It's just to renew the small project permit for an additional year as allowed in the permit.
So moved. Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's okay. Next one is a RDA Commonwealth Ave DPW sewer replacement.
Yes.
Oh, we're a team. I'm Jack Sullivan. Nice to meet you.
I'm at 15.
Oh, you're on the butter. Okay.
Team nonetheless.
Team. Do you want me to start off, Jennifer, or do you want to give an overview?
Sure, this is fairly straightforward. This is exempt under Riverfront and under the State Wetlands Protection Act, so we're just hearing it tonight as a buffer zone project. It doesn't obviously meet any small project criteria, so we're here with an RDA. I know there's flags shown on the plan, but they're not in the field, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, so we're not approving the delineation this evening, only whether or not the work would have any impact. We're proposing erosion controls at the end of the street. I have some photos of the area. They did do some improvements down there for some erosion recently, but all the work is within pavement. I'm sure Jeff can explain that further.
Okay, sure. For the record, my name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group, and the town of North Andover DPW is the applicant for this project. Commonwealth Ave is a short dead-end street. There's 3 sewer manholes in existing 6-inch sewer line that they're looking to replace. The existing manholes are brick. They're gonna put in new precast concrete manholes, and the existing 6-inch line will be removed, and a new 8-inch SDR 35 PVC line will be put in. They're going back in the same location, same footprint. As Jennifer said, the majority of the work is outside of any jurisdictional area. It's just towards the end of the street that we fall within the 100-foot buffer, but there's no work within the 25-foot. All work will take place within the pavement area. I don't see the need for dewatering for this project based on the topography and the invert elevations on the sewer. I did put a note in the RDA, if they did have to dewater, they'd have to set up some hay bales in a crushed stone area to dewater to at least 50 feet away from the BVW. There's no existing street drainage on this street. I think that's half the reason they put in the drainage improvements of the riprap at the end of the roadway. So there's no, typically, I'd put some sort of silt protection in around catch basins, or we could pump to those, but there's nothing in Commonwealth as far as drainage goes. One other thing, this is not in a floodplain. It's in the 500-year floodplain area. It's the one area in this whole neighborhood that's outside a Zone A floodplain.
What does that mean? It's not in the floodplain, because that street flooded in 2006.
Floodplains identified by FEMA on maps for the town, so it's not, it's another resource area that the commission would have to worry about, but it's not identified.
That whole area was flooded in 2006. So I don't know what the FEMA did, but I'm sure that we remember the Mother's Day flood, and that whole street was flooded at that time.
I think we'll have time for input after, but I think we need to finish presenting.
I just wanted to point out to the commission, if it was in a 100-year flood plain and I was changing any elevations, which I'm not, I would have to show some sort of flood compensation. But based on the FEMA maps, and there is a known 100-year flood elevation in this area, I'm above it in all spots. And on the firm maps, it shows as a 500-year flood. That's basically the project in a nutshell. DPW is looking to get going on this project this summer. And I'll take any comments from the commissions. They're basically just going to saw cut the areas they need to excavate out for the manholes in the pipe, put in the new infrastructure, and then repave the trench areas.
Jack?
I have no questions.
No questions. Joe?
5 or 6 years ago, the town did a rehab on the east side trunk sewer. Is this feeds into that area, but it's not part of that system, right?
That's correct.
So this is a separate single neighborhood
Right.
collection system, and not collecting a larger area.
Correct. It's just standalone. Like it just has a 6-inch main. That's why I suggested to DPW they put in an 8. And the idea is, I didn't mention, but with the existing sewer laterals to the homes, they're going to leave those in place unless they find like root intrusion or some deficiencies in the laterals. They're going to look to just connect them over to the new main.
So what's the genesis of the whole idea of doing this? Is it inflow and infiltration?
Yes, that's
actually II rehab.
It's part of their II fee that they've collected. They looked at this area where they're old brick manholes, and they'd taken some water. They wanted to get this up, use some of the II money to deal with this. But there's been no real, I asked over the winter if there were any history of backups or any complaints like that into homes, nothing like that.
So just with, I think the abutter had mentioned the concern with the 500-year floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, whatever, the Mother's Day flood, it really doesn't really much matter, the resource area. What we really have is a sewer deficiency because of the age.
Right.
And when water tables are high, groundwater is getting into the sewer, causing an overburden to the collection system as well as an overburden at the treatment plant. And nationally, we're all trying to get infiltration out of our pipe system. That's what this is all about. The only reason you're here is because you're near the river. The project would happen regardless. This has no impact to the resource area, which is exactly what we here to ask us to consider.
Correct.
So I'm fine with that, but I hope that was clear.
Yeah, and we're actually, if there wasn't a local bylaw, we wouldn't even be here. Under the State Wetland Protection Act, we're exempt from even having to file. It's only under the local that we need to.
Well, I got this letter, so I just...
Let the commission speak, and I'll do it. And questions from my buddies. That's okay.
That is okay.
Okay. Sean?
No questions.
No questions. Okay. And we have input from my buddies.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry about that. I'm
It's okay.
not up to speed on the protocol, and I appreciate your patience. I just got this letter, so I just wanted to come in and learn about what was happening. I'm actually excited about the project because I've had to have some work done because of roots growing through pipes, and it sounds like this may help that. The one concern I do have is, will I be without water at any point in time? Will I be will my actual home be down without water any substantial point in time?
No. I actually talked to DPW how they were going to run this job. It sounds a little disturbing, but they actually, they're not even going to shut down your use of water, kitchens, bathrooms. They'll do everything live when they put everything in. They'll try to do it off-peak times, like the peak times for usage is first thing in the morning or at night, but there'll be no disruption to your water service or your use of your house.
And how long is this supposed to take?
It shouldn't take that. I can't see this project taking more than like 2 weeks.
Okay.
I do want to be clear on the question that was asked and the answer given. I'm not sure what it came across. You have root intrusion problems in your sewer service to your house. Earlier you said that you're only doing the mains and not the laterals to the house, correct?
Only if when they're going by, if they notice that a lateral's been damaged or if there's root intrusion towards the main. They're not going to investigate the entire service lateral between the main and the house.
So within the right-of-way itself?
Within the right-of-way.
So that there's a root intrusion between the right-of-way and the cellar.
It's still on you.
Not necessarily.
I understand.
Right.
I understand.
If you had a real concern, you could always talk to Tim Willett, who's the superintendent. If there's an issue, you might be able to work something out with him. Or the contractor on site, maybe you could work out a deal with him.
So at the end of the day, once the street is dug up and the pipe is laid down, if there's any issues, who do I talk to?
DPW,
Tim Willett.
Tim Willett at DPW.
Okay.
And the notice that went out to him, Tim Willett's phone number and contact information is right on the notice.
It is.
Jack, I just had one concern. You put the erosion control right through the riprap. Is that going to work? Or before, when they installed the riprap, and this was under their, they have their general permit. DPW has a general permit NOI for maintenance activities, so we get notice of the projects they want to do, and we go out and approve them. But they did install the erosion control at the toe of the slope.
At the toe of the slope, I tried to
maybe
put it
put
right
it-
at the limit of the 25. I didn't want to go inside of that where it's already disturbed in that
Yeah,
area.
I'm just
It could
wondering
go
if
at the
you'll be
toe.
able to trench anything in or get anything to prevent erosion from going. Maybe put a row of silt fence at the bottom and put a sock at the top. just
That's a good idea.
In the,
I'm
The
fine.
road profile is pretty flat out there.
It's flat, but
it drains right to the back though, so.
Exactly, I think the sock is gonna do it, it's gonna catch it.
But I think Jennifer's approach makes sense because it is going to be hard to trench anything in. We're in pavement or riprap, so if it's a condition of the RDA that we put into means of defense, that's fine.
Okay, we can add that.
You all set?
I'm all set. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any other questions from our butters?
So this would be a positive number 2B, because we're not approving the delineation, and a negative number 3 with conditions for pre- and post-construction inspections. And I suggested no overnight stockpiling, which they probably wouldn't do anyway, but just so that the
That's fine.
midnight rain event doesn't take something down the street. And a negative number 5 for exemptions under the riverfront.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks, Lon.
Next one is 874 Salem Street.
Oh, yes, thank you. I always forget those. Do you have your green cards from the abutter notification? Or not green, they might be white slips or a list?
Yeah, we
or
do.
something.
I followed it.
That's
want
them.
these?
Yep.
You need the cut sheet as well?
No, this is good. Thank you.
That's it.
All right. So this is, let me just look in my little folder here. A filing for an above-ground pool. This is also in Riverfront and buffer zone to BVW. It's exempt under Riverfront. There's a plan in here somewhere. There we go. So I did go out and review the delineation, and it's a total slope at the back of the yard. I did ask the owners for some information about the filter, and they did send that, and it's a cartridge-style non-backwashing, as you prefer. As you can see from the photos, the yard's pretty much flat as a pancake, so I don't think there's any need for erosion control, and they're not excavating, they're just bringing in stone and stone dust. Other than the town does sell some wetland markers that we usually have people put on the fence, or some trees at the back, kind of just signifying for future owners that there's wetland back there, which is pretty obvious in your neck of the woods. The only thing I found that was, there is an old filing, it's DEP file number like 66. There's something in there ordering the, first of all, the project was started as a violation. Someone was working, and but then they were ordered to record the order, which they never did. But this is like a few owners away from that original filing. So it was never recorded, and it doesn't have a COC. But they're...
Jeff?
Why is it exempt from Riverfront?
Pools are exempt per, can look at the statute.
State exempt?
State exempt,
okay.
yeah. Not ours. Well, actually, we incorporate the riverfront in its entire, I mean, the Rivers Protection Act in its entirety into the bylaw, so there are no additional standards, so it's exempt under both.
I guess a question, the photos that we had passed around showed the site to be very flat. Is there an existing fence there right now?
Yes, you can.
Is that the
Yeah,
one
that's
50
that.
feet?
Yeah. No,
Right.
the 50 is two stakes in the ground that
Okay.
were placed.
Oh, those are the
The
two
fence
stakes.
is the big rectangle it starts at the back left
Got
corner
it.
of the house. You can kind of see the shadow of it there.
Got it, okay. Okay, the 50 feet is just showing the no-build zone.
From the delineation that we got from the engineer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, no more questions, thank you.
No question. Joe?
Well, it's a pretty straightforward proposal. You could have a company do this, or you doing this on your own?
No, we're gonna have a company do it.
Okay, so you know, like a one-weekend project?
Yeah, they said they could get it done in like a day or two, something like that. Basically, most of the time it'd be putting the stone dust and leveling that
So
kind
no
of stuff.
long-term disturbance of land?
No.
Disturb it, build it, and fix it all in a couple of days?
Yeah.
I'm all set.
Sean?
No question?
Done?
No question.
Motion?
So we did approve the delineation on this, so it's a positive 2A for the delineation, and a negative number 3 for work in the buffer zone, and a negative number 5 for the riverfront exemptions. I recommend post-construction inspection and 3 wetland markers.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
While we're here and talking about this property, is there anything we should do or consider to do regarding the old enforcement or the old?
Well,
Or just let it language?
I don't think there's no enforcement action necessary on this. It's just a matter that long ago it was never
was only
recorded. It
paperwork.
doesn't show up on their
It
title.
was only paperwork, they just wanted it recorded. So
I don't think
by
most
this
people are.
action, this will be recorded.
Right.
So
Yeah,
we're all set.
I just wanted to bring it up, but I don't think it's worth doing anything with. It's way too long ago to be relevant.
Thank you, all set.
All set? Thank you.
First order bid, NOIs 242, no DP number 88/90 Saunders Street.
All right. So I saw Mary here.
Yeah, she said.
Oh, there she is. Pool photos back. So this, actually, let's get to the right.
Yeah.
There we go. I did go out and confirm the wetland delineation on this one as well, and it's a proposed addition, and I'll let Mary give you the details.
Sure. So this is just a 16 by 30 addition proposed on an existing single-family home. It's proposed on sonotubes. It's a flat site as well. It's a fenced yard, and the entire property is within the riverfront area to Cochituate Brook. The work is, you can see, is proposed primarily outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, but in the riverfront area. Well, actually, there's about half and half, the 100-foot buffer zone as well. There isn't any other location on the lot to put this size addition based on the setbacks that are required by zoning. And that doesn't extend any closer to the river than existing conditions. It's proposed on sonotubes. As I said, there's no tree clearing. There's a shed on the property as well. It's shown that's proposed to be removed, so there's some reduction in the total impervious area by the elimination of the shed. And that's pretty much it. We have erosion control shown around the, straw wattles shown around the perimeter of the work area, really just to identify the limit of work.
I did have Mary sent today a brief alternatives analysis. I think you do show the envelope of where the addition can go. The setbacks, right, are
On the plan, right.
Jack?
Yeah, well, some good features of the project. It looks like it's proposed to go on sonotubes, which is not very, doesn't disturb the soil very much at all. It's a pretty big addition for sonotubes, but that being said, that's how it's applied. The 16 by 30 addition, though, creates a good amount of impervious surface, and I guess I don't have all the details of the proposal, but are there means of managing that rainwater from the roof?
We could provide gravel drip strip around the perimeter of it, but beyond that, I haven't been provided any detail on
Are there going to be
any
downspouts?
further infiltration. I don't know the answer to that question.
Jack, take a look at just look at the ground condition there.
There's quite a bit of
compacted soils.
It's pretty compacted. Yeah, they have some big dogs, so I think they do number on the grass.
I did point out that we had a previous filing right next door, and we did have them plant a buffer strip. They were putting in a new fence, so we wound up with the buffer strip behind the fence, but I think even if they can't keep grass, it might be nice to try to do a strip of something before they hit, you hit the river, so they could catch.
Well,
some of that
they have a fence, a stockade fence in the backyard. Looks like portions of it are not actually on their property, but it's well beyond the 25-foot no disturb zone. So there is a vegetated buffer. It's a sloped buffer, but it's a vegetated buffer between the wetland and the and the yard area.
I think something needs to be done about the yard. 'Cause it's clear that there's erosion from their downspouts, either something different with the downspouts or some kind of ability to stabilize that lot, because it's like there's a river basically between the downspout and the bank at the back.
Yeah, we can look at, so a gravel, infiltration trench or something like that where the downspouts are. There isn't any heavy equipment required for this work, so I, wouldn't want to have to do a dry well or something, get a backhoe in there. There's no other work that requires that kind of equipment. But if there's something that can be done by hand that, certainly an improved grassy area, grassy strip would be helpful.
Well, Jennifer's done a site review on it, maybe for the next meeting, we've got to wait for the number anyway.
We don't have a file number, correct?
You can have some discussion with Jennifer.
Sure.
And you guys can work something out so the next meeting you come
Sure.
and have a decent alternative on what we can do.
Jen, you referred to permit issued on a budding property. And was that the issue, the property that we had the issue with getting them into compliance with plantings?
They, next door was a full rebuild. They tore it down and put something new up. So they were, under the redevelopment standard, had to look at, improvements to the riverfront area. They had a bit more of a developed backyard, and it kind of, I think it went right over the hill, and I think there were some issues with dumping. I mean, it was a slightly, the vegetated bank behind, and I think there's a photo of it, is, it's leaf covered, there's things growing on it. I think probably another issue with the yard, at least the largest tree is a Norway maple, and you can just tell nothing grows underneath it.
Right.
It's big, shady, and probably producing all kinds of chemicals that don't make it hospitable for anything to grow back there, let alone grass. So that's why maybe some low shrubs or ground cover or something that might...
Just along the back fence line?
Right. Or maybe even that's where they do some kind of filter strip, or I don't know, but the downspout and the unvegetated backyard are definitely causing a problem.
Yeah, you can see it on that exposed rock and
Yep.
seems like a sandy bed
Okay.
leading back. That's really my only issue is I think stabilization so close to the river is probably in...
Well, you have a pretty good idea what we're looking for.
I think so, yeah, and I haven't had an opportunity to consult with the client on that, so we can discuss that and come up with some concepts to run by you.
Okay. Questions?
Would moving the addition closer to the street be amenable?
I don't know that I don't know what the interior of the house looks like and what they're trying to accomplish with the addition, but I don't think that would necessarily make a difference in terms of protection for the riverfront area, just because of the nature of the site. So, you might be able to slide it there, but it's still, you've got the house where it is already. It's not going any closer to the river than the existing house, and it's, like I said, it's over a grassy area. It would move it forward to still be over a grassy area. You're not really... It doesn't provide a significant habitat or anything like that where to make that change. I guess
so the improvements would be then to ensure that, like, vegetation and to stabilize.
We could do that, something like that.
ground.
Some kind of enhancement to improve the runoff quality and as mitigation. Sure.
I just have a question, and it's got nothing to do with, well, is this going to be a two-story addition or just a one-story?
I do not know that. I only know it's on the plan.
It's a big addition to put on sonotubes. You put a second story, it'd be a real interesting addition. But like I said, if we can do some work out in the backyard,
okay,
that would work.
Sure.
Joe?
Yeah, I was going to ask a similar question about the sonotubes and how that decision was arrived at. And Mary, I heard you mention that no heavy equipment, something I'm hearing, hand labor. Is this a private homeowner's private project, or has he got a contractor doing it? Because I'm concerned with the duration of disturbed area. How long might this? I've sometimes look at all of us have been weekend warriors, and
sure.
taking 6 months to finish something.
Yeah.
Bless you.
And you know what
All
the
I know is that
impact
they're expecting a baby, and they're trying to get the work done before the baby's born.
Okay. So you're minimizing the time of the impact is obviously, something I'd be concerned with, but I don't think we have the answer on that tonight anyway. Okay. I'm also,
Sean?
Jen, are there any waivers for this?
No.
Any questions?
Well, the only thing that's very, I think you need to talk to the owner and
Get some more information on that.
Sure. What the addition is going to look like, if they have plans or something like that that haven't been submitted, at least they could address some of the questions.
With the roof lines or something, yeah.
I guess also, is there any egress or access proposed to it? If there is, they should be showing that.
Yeah.
I just
think
know that this was the house that was, it was on TV when they kind of rehabbed it and flipped it. I forget what the name of the show is because I don't watch those shows, but anyway, it was a deal, but they ended up only with this little egress out the back, I think, because they didn't want to have to file as part of what they were doing for the show. So I just would be concerned if they want some kind of in or out to this
Okay.
thing, if it's going to be a mud room or a...
I'll find out. Sure. This is what they asked me to permit, so.
Yeah, if this is going to be a covered addition, two-story addition or something like that, then they may be looking for a porch or something on the back. They ought to show it that,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't think that's the intention, but
Egress
yeah.
from that.
I'll confirm that.
And do you have the white slips or the? Okay, yeah, they had to notify one of the
Over
buildings at
200
Sutton Pond. Thank you. Woohoo! It's going to double the size of the file. All right, so we need to continue. And I'll, if you get me the details early enough, actually, I'm out next week. I was going to say I would draft it, but I probably can't.
But you might be able to have something drafted for the next meeting?
That's what I was going to propose, but I'm away next week, so I don't know that I can, but I will try. I'll
Okay.
put a note to...
And they're eager to get underway, like I said.
Well, maybe I'll ask Heidi, and then that way, if you get her the details, then maybe she
That would
can
be
write
great.
something up.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a,
second?
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Next one is 242-1676.
I think that's both 75 and 76 are ready to close and issue.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Already done.
Well, we were just continuing because we had a 3-week meeting gap, so they've already been drafted, and they'll review them at the end of the meeting.
Documents
Yeah,
next couple
probably
days.
before I leave.
Oh,
so.
good. Okay.
Unless you want to sit and stay and talk for a while, it's up to you.
No, I just trying to get a piece of paper. They want papers. So,
Papers are coming.
Thank you. Next one is 242-1671. That's 2302 Turnpike Street.
So, do you want me to pull up the new plan there?
Sure.
Actually, there's 2 of them. One's for the sewer, one's for the entrance, I think. So since I think we left this open because planning was still hearing it, and some changes were made, but they were outside of jurisdiction, so I think we can briefly review those, and then this should be ready to close an issue as well.
Great. Yeah, good evening. Greg Hockmuth from Williams & Sparagus here presenting Earthworks. Chris Sparagus was at the last hearing, and I think he went over everything, and it's my understanding that at that time Lisa Eggleston had completed her review, and everything was up to par as far as she was concerned. Since that happened, there were 2 changes to the plans. The changes were outside of your jurisdiction, but it's also important to note that the changes didn't affect the impervious surface, the drainage calculations, or the flow patterns to a point where it would require additional review. The entrance was shifted slightly, just to put it across from the entrance across the street just to make it more uniform. And the sewer and water were also relocated. Instead of the sewer coming out onto Sharpener's Pond, now it's coming out onto 114. The sewer is shown there in green, and the water is shown there in blue. And let me see, I just want to read this here. Positions the driveway opposite the driveway across the street on Sharpener's Pond Road, which is a better traffic pattern position. There is no change to the amount of impervious surface or stormwater flow patterns. The watersheds remain unchanged, and this change occurs outside the 100-foot buffer zone. And then Chris also submitted a letter describing the sewer and water changes as well.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Yep.
No comments.
All set.
Sean?
All set.
Dennis? Motion?
I move that we close 242-1671 and issue a decision within 21 days.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous.
Great, thank you.
So I did draft that, so you
Great.
should have that hopefully before I leave. And I just have to change the plan reference because they redated the plan, so.
And we apologize for getting him in today.
That's all right, it's only a date.
Thank you.
Next one is 242-1677, 350 Winthrop Ave.
So we did get a new plan sheet. I think it was, the new plan sheet was largely about the dewatering. And they had proposed just a riprap dissipation erosion pad. I guess given the substrate that's in that stream, and they're, going to be sandbagging it off and dewatering, they're going to end up mucking up something. So I said they needed to do something for turbidity, and suggested maybe they use a bag, but they're concerned about the volume. So I think they've changed the plan to go back to using a standard hay bale enclosure for dewatering.
Good evening, Eric Gerard with TEC. Back to discuss the culvert replacement at the Market Basket facility at 350 Winthrop Ave. And we have furthered our discussions with the contractor for the means and methods, approximate duration, and construction cost, primarily related to three of the alternatives, the 4x4 box, the 4x6 box, and the 4x6 three-sided open bottom culvert. In addition, we discussed the dewatering solution, which would be similar for all the options. To look at the construction analysis between the three options, the 4x4 box culvert option is an order of magnitude at about $200,000 to install the 130-foot culvert. As we get increase in size, it goes up another 25% to the 4x6, and then the three-sided gets upwards of 65 to 70% over the 200,000. The duration, the 4x4 box is the quickest at about 13 days, according to the contractor. Most of this work would be at night. Approximately 10 of the days would need to happen at night, 3 during the day. The 4x6 box, a little bit longer, about a week longer, at 17 days. And then the three-sided open bottom culvert is 21 days plus. And there's a lot of variables that they wanted to kind of include, kind of construction contingencies related to the footings and the sheeting that would be required as part of that three-sided box open bottom culvert. Dewatering, we're anticipating at each side putting sandbags with a poly liner, 2 pumps on the upstream end, trenching 2 6-inch pipes across the driveway and discharging on the downstream end. Each side would be blocked off, just so no flow would also come from the downstream end upstream. After further discussion to remove the sediment, we believe that putting the distilling basin back with the filter fabric in there along with riprap, in addition to the riprap going back into the channel, will be the best solution. Just due to the flows, if both of these pumps kick on during a higher flow, it's a significant flow. We feel with the silt bags that it has the potential to burst the bag, and sediment would just get released regardless. So that's our proposal for the dewatering. Since the last we discussed, DEP has issued their file number, and they did not provide, they had no comments on the proposal. And we have coordinated further with the contractor. So we want to open it back up to questions and go from there.
Yeah.
I guess my questions, they're probably pretty basic about the dewatering. It looks like what you're doing is you're drawing from the brook that comes down from the easterly side and bypassing around the project to the westerly side. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so that pipe, there are 2 pipes, 6 inches, run that whole length, and they discharge into a 12-inch riprap for dissipation and erosion control. I get that, and then you've got the sandbags for dewatering and erosion control that block off the project from the discharge of those pumps. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. How does this address the turbidity question? That if you are disturbing that water, on the inlet and on the easterly end, how does that not increase the turbidity downstream?
Okay. So the plan that's before you now, we are going to modify it to put back in the stilling basin with the straw bales and the filter fabric.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay, that's not shown on.
Yeah, it's not. So I think we would put back the basin here, and I would have the bales, filter fabric in there, and also a lot of stone to also dissipate that energy before it came down the slope.
We've seen that detail before. I'm not sure what we plan to accomplish tonight, but that would be acceptable to me. Seems to address the issue. So, are you proposing the 4x4 culvert?
That is correct. That is our preferred alternative to move forward.
That seemed pretty clear from last meeting. Okay, I have no more questions.
No questions.
The only question I have is, I understand the 4x6 3-sided culvert is a little bit overkill or whatever. You said it wasn't good, but I'm hoping you're not basing your alternatives analysis on cost. I was hoping that you could tell us what the flows are going to be, or why would it be not good to go a little bigger. My concern is I've seen that parking lot flood in the lower section because the water can't go through there. That's why I was leaning toward the 4x6, but I'm going to leave it to my engineer next to me. He's going to say what he thinks. Thank you.
Thank you. It's exactly where my mind went. The culvert itself is the least of our concern. It all really comes right down to dewatering, the size of the watershed. And I guess I feel a conflict between 2 pumps running simultaneously at a capacity of 4,350 gallons per minute. Tells me it's a pretty large upgraded watershed that we're trying to drain, and we know it is. And we all remember the old drive-in theater when we were kids, and that used to flood out pretty regularly from up above. So I think the culvert size is probably driven by the watershed, and the pump selection is driven by the size of the water they need to have on a peak flow basis. But that together, I just see huge velocities and the ability to dewater and then control the silt coming out of that discharge being highly inadequate. Short of a frac tank, pumping into a frac tank and under pressure, let the solids filter out of it and then maintain that frac tank on a pretty regular basis. I think the dewatering technique is where this project fails. And as I'm looking at the numbers, I think it's destined for that. We're going to see one flash storm in the summertime at night, and the pumps are going to do their job. They're going to kick in and prevent it from overtopping the surface, but it's just going to totally scour the downstream side. The velocities are going to be enormous. So I think a lot of effort in backup, supporting that effort needs to be submitted to us before I consider anything with this dewatering approach.
Nothing at this point.
Nothing at this point.
So, any response to
So the purpose of the pumps is to keep the clean water coming in and then discharging it over. So as far as, I guess, the sediments that are concerned that are going to be in there coming from the upstream end, it really should be minimal, or it should be pretty clean water. And then what's
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying perfectly clean water, even if it was a fire hydrant under pressure that's not going to be able to produce 4,300 gallons per minute. Two pumps here is going to create a nozzle effect that's going to totally scour out your downstream channel, unattenuated. I think you've got a recipe for disaster on your discharge, and you've got to find a way to control that and de-energize it. And confining it to this little area is not the answer. You wouldn't open a fire hydrant right there without expecting that channel to wash out.
Right, we got the 12-inch riprap stone to dissipate that energy as it comes out.
Give me the backup of what you're showing, of why you think that's the discharge that's there. I'm actually thinking that maybe discharging to the parking lot and let the energy come out of it, let it get flattened, and then sheet flow into its own system might be the better way, but not discharging directly to the channel. And there needs to be something more. That's like turning two fire hoses loose, full blast.
Jim Lamp, J&Co, representing Market Basket. I think I hear what you're saying, but we're not putting any more flow downstream than would be there if the culvert were running during whatever event we're talking about. And I understand it's where it comes out of a tight pipe, and so it's coming out a lot faster rate than it would out of a 4x4 culvert. So we're really talking, and there's, for the most part, when we were out there today, there's water in the channel. So I think once we get it to the channel, we should be okay. It's from the pipe discharge point to where the water is in the existing channel that I believe you're concerned about. And I think we can make a larger bed and try to spread that out quicker, or even have it, not discharge from a 6-inch pipe, because that's just carrying the flow once the pump gets it into the 6-inch pipe. Maybe we can put it into some kind of structure and have it overflow.
That's one of the beauties of the open bottom three-sided boxes, is you can do it in the wet. You can prepare your bed. You can drop in your sections in the wet. You can maintain bypass flow while you're doing the work.
But our contractor told us that they have to dewater it to pour the foundations for that bed, so they can't pour the foundations in the wet.
You can actually coffin dam the footing sides and let the water flow through the middle. You can, but I'm not going to get into means and methods. I think pumping at high velocity is not the answer.
What storm event is that flow that you're giving them?
So that could pretty much take the bank full width of what's out there, which it rarely has been at that upstream level every time we've
But that's a storm event you're trying to carry?
Nope, so that can handle the bank flow width based on our stream stats data. So it's just about the.
So is it normal flow? What is?
So like for example,
CFS?
a half-inch storm event is going to generate.
Half-inch 24-hour.
Yes.
Had it 24.
It was significant. It was half a CFS coming through there, so it was significantly less.
What is your 2-inch, 20-minute August flash thunderstorm produce?
I'd have to look at that, I don't know.
That's your design stuff.
There's got to be a way we can, when we're not constructing, which we're not going to construct during storm events, obviously we'll shut down the operation. There's a way that if, say we have 5 sections on the high side constructed, we aren't going to take the low side out until we get to that point. So there's going to be a gap between the constructed box and the remaining CMP. So if there's a storm event, I don't think we're going to try to bypass pump it. We'll let it go through the box section with a small gap between that and what hasn't been removed of the old culvert. And we're going to avoid storm events. We're going to shut down the operation. We're not going to be out there trying to fight, pay for contractors to fight during a storm event.
But you're not going to be able to let the water flow through either, because you'll be all disturbed.
You have a coffer dam built, and you're going to be pumping around it.
Right. You're not going to remove that coffer dam from a storm event.
But it would top the. We're not draining the upland, the wetlands. We're just keeping it to a certain level.
Right.
So we're not going to have that coffer dam above the roadway height. It will top the coffer dam, go through the culvert, and top the culvert, the coffer dam on the low side.
That's not usually the desired effect, but.
Typically, I leave this up to a contractor that does this work, because they always say, a desk jockey isn't.
What's the viability of laying a new culvert in the dry, leaving this one in place, lay it in, and when it's in functioning, decommission the old one?
It comes down to the pylon sign. I mean, we could probably do something. We'd have to remove the pylon sign or work with the signal arm, and that's what we've been trying to avoid as well.
I'd be more inclined to consider a not temporary, but a future permanent disturbance elsewhere in the upstream wetland in order to maintain the flow of the existing CMP, to have them avoid those other obstructions, to get the new culvert in, and when it's done and complete, open it up to service and decommission the old one.
What about put the new culvert instead of in the same location as the existing one, up there where you've got the bypass piping, in other words, go around the old one with the new culvert.
That's what I was talking about.
That's the thing.
Once that's in place, then you can leave the old culvert functioning while you put the new one in, and when the new one's ready, then you decommission the old one.
I'm not entirely excited about bringing the flow in at a different angle, but that's something we can do.
Yeah, I think the impacts to the wetland coming in, we'd have to reform that entire way that the water currently comes in on the upstream side. There's a ridge where the wetlands come down, I believe, and where that center line of that ditch will actually be.
It's a pretty scoured channel.
Upstream or downstream or both? Downstream.
Well, where it enters the head wall, but then they're also confined. Were you considering constructing behind it? And then you'd be into the infrastructure, right? If you're going to construct them simultaneously, they can't construct in front of it because they can't get the channel there.
It's truly what I think, Mr. Lynch, you're concerned about the discharge point to the point where it gets back to normalized flow in the channel south of the crossing. That's the distance that you're worried about.
Well, I've replaced several large culverts over the course of my career, several dozens of large culverts, and the juggling act of controlling the water during routine flows and during peak flows is always the challenge, and inevitably it's only on the discharge side where you feel that impact. So I'm just being realistic that when pumping, the downstream side moving down that intermittent stream is where all the impact's going to be felt, and regardless of what measures you put in place to protect that. Knowing that the existing culvert conveys water, and that's your best bypass function, is using it. And of course, like you're saying, is you're confined with other infrastructure, but I think again, I'm looking at this for the first time, and I'm looking at it at small scale, but I think there is another alternative to put the new culvert behind the sign on their own, closer into the parking lot on their own property. Granted, the intake head wall will be in a different location and bigger, but at the end of the game, if the other one's decommissioned, it's a net benefit. It's a temporary disturbance, you know. And I think with a juggling act of flows like that, I think...
This runs dry, this goes dry during the summer months. This goes absolutely dry during the summer months. At times, it's an intermittent stream.
Yeah, I guess there's no denying that. That's why I talked about the 20-minute thunderstorm in August. That's your design flow. That's when the sheet coming off of Den Rock Hill, not the rock itself, but the whole hill coming down, that's where your flows really come in, and they come in fast.
That's all downstream of us, too.
Again, when I said Den Rock, I didn't mean the park, but the hill itself coming up towards Waverly Road.
114 Hill.
Yeah, heading up towards Waverly Road. That's very shallow, overburdened to rock, and the runoff is huge. So when the water hits, it's coming at you real fast. When you get those 20-minute bursts of 2 inches, in July and August, the classic New England thunderstorm, that is very flashy, and that channel fills up pretty darn fast. So yeah, most of the time, that's the juggling act. Most of the time it's dry, but boy, you better be ready to handle it when it does come.
As far as, I guess, the de-water, we could certainly run it along the pavement. There's plenty of length up there that we could certainly discharge that and let it naturally come back through, putting some straw bales along the edge of the pavement.
Yeah, we can bring the forest line out and then do a long extended tail.
That would knock the velocity way down.
Yeah,
and let it trickle, basically sheet flow.
It's going to do what it does today to get in, off the pavement.
We would like to do whatever we can to keep the replacement where it is, minimize, and I understand you don't want to do this on cost, but one of the analysis the DEP allows us to do is cost. This is a we're getting tied into new signals on this with DOT, so this is getting up there in cost. So we'd love to try to replace this in kind, not in kind, but in its same location. If we can come up with something that's satisfactory to the commission to allow us to answer your concerns on the scouring and erosion, we would like to try to keep this and try to get this done quickly. This is a failed culvert. We've already got a plate on it. I don't know what's happened since the last storm. We haven't lifted up the plate. Don't really want to. So if something like that would satisfy the commission, we could definitely. I don't know if you'd allow us to work with Jennifer to come up with that solution, but we'd like to try to get this thing done sooner rather than later.
I'm not going to be here next week, so.
Are you comfortable with the size of the culvert?
The size of the culvert? Have I been involved in the hydraulics?
It seems to me that you mentioned the 4x6 culvert and the 4x4 culvert. I think they're going to have about the same capacity because that 4x6, they're filling up a couple of feet on the stream bed area.
Correct.
So you got about the same.
It was just more muck in the bottom.
The effective
placement of the material on the bottom.
The hydraulic opening is
You have to wash all
similar.
that sediment out to increase the capacity of it. Otherwise, it's the same as the 4x4
Correct.
as shown on these plans. Anyway, the other one would be the 6x4.
Right.
Would have more capacity, perhaps, but
To answer your question is, I don't know. I wasn't involved up to this point, but I can only imagine that they just didn't try to mimic the hydraulic capacity of the existing corrugated metal pipe. I hope that they looked at, I'm sure they did, looked at the upstream gradient hydrology and what's coming at it and properly sized the capacity based on that. The cross-section is what it is, and as Doug just pointed out, the various cross-sections are only a way to handle the stream bed.
That was more, for the
critters.
The maximum
More for the
extent
critters.
practical of the stream crossing standards, correct.
All right. So they have to come up with the plan. That's put it up, but Jen's not gonna be here. So,
Just have them submit it to Heidi and have Heidi pass it along to me. And others, if anybody else wants, but I'll certainly look at it.
that's why we don't hold up their project for another 2 weeks.
She still has to
And
write
then
the
come
order,
with it.
right? So, you still have to write up the order anyway, right? So that won't happen until you come back.
Right, yeah, I mean, now we're promising 2 orders for next time. We'll see what we can do. I mean, we'll do our best to, if Heidi can draft them, I'll edit them when I get back, and as long as we have the right details and that sort of thing, we might be able to get it done, but that, you know, you'll have to work with Heidi and Joe to get a dewatering detail approved. I guess I'm just concerned with the parking lot issue, you know, running clean stream water over a parking lot is not an ideal situation. So, I mean, you need to sweep the parking lot first, you know, some erosion controls, so we're not picking up any, you know.
I would assume a filter fabric wrapped stone would probably be better than trying to anchor hay bales on the parking lot also.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna, I was thinking more.
I'm only looking at it from the energy, you know, knock the energy down. It may not be the best solution.
Right, well, I mean,
Like
you could run hay bales or something down the length of the.
We could do that
so it would filter
after
through.
it gets
Right,
to the
yeah, so
soil.
it would filter through something. I mean, you could put stone on the parking lot too and
Yeah.
discharge the water into stone on fabric and.
And that should make sure whatever comes off the parking lot.
I guess just the pitch of the parking lot, is it gonna pitch to the stream?
How are you gonna provide access to the stores there while this project?
There's a large strip of basically striped off pavement that doesn't even get used by vehicles. If you look at an aerial, I don't know if you have an aerial on, but there's just a large area that's adjacent to the long drive aisle that goes along the front.
There's a huge.
That doesn't even get used. You can kind of see the drive aisle, and then there's all this extra pavement that is just.
No, but as coming in off of 114 into.
We're going under, that pipe that they show there is actually dug under or into the pavement
Well,
for
it's
the
into
temporary.
pavement, but you're gonna open it up.
That's why I say you're doing it at night.
Right, we're doing most of that work at night.
You're gonna close it all off.
Correct.
Allow people to enter.
Yeah, so once say the first night we go in and we actually put those 6-inch lines in, cover them up, and we don't have to worry about them until the project's over, then we remove them. So that's not even, there's nothing on the surface for the force main. And then the other one is excavate and then put plates back over during the day and then excavate at night and put plates back over and close it up every day. It's not a great situation. I mean, we wish it
No,
didn't
it's
happen. We wish we weren't here.
It's into the site.
And unfortunately, the other entrance is only
It's an exit only.
Right.
You know, the only thing where you could do it, I suppose you could use it, but you're not gonna get trucks in that way and stuff like that, so. Could be an interesting project,
For a small one, yes.
yes.
All right, so how do you want to handle this? You're gonna, you can't.
So I guess, if you're, I mean, there's waiver requests, I mean, we can vote at the next meeting, but I guess the ideal for them is to, if you're okay with, we're going to go with the 4x4, they're just going to work on their dewatering detail and try to get something worked out, submitting to Heidi and getting it to Joe before I get back.
Okay. All right, so we need to continue.
And what is the next hearing date?
2 weeks.
Second.
Thank you.
Joe.
I don't want to get those dewatering plans to Joe and to Heidi ASAP, so if there's any questions, you can review it and get it all cleaned up for the next meeting.
If you email me tomorrow, I'll make sure you have you have Heidi's email address and all that. I mean, it's on our website as well, but I'll make sure I let her know.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have a motion to continue?
We did, Deb and Joe.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Yes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. For 21592 extension request for Pleasant Street.
So this is the Stevens Pond invasive and algae treatments. Aquatic Control Technologies is now Solitude is the new name of the company. I don't know if anybody's here for them. Doesn't appear so, but they didn't need to. They did submit their 2000. We have the 2014 and now the 2015 report of what they treated and how things are responding. I think I forwarded that, or it was in the meeting materials.
Yep.
So per the bylaw, they can only get the 1-year extension at this point. They can get 2 1-year extensions, but they're seeking their first. So I don't have any concerns other than, I don't know why this won't close, you know, but.
On the original order, was there some sort of measurable performance that we asked for, or did we suggest that they submit if they could do one?
No.
You know how successful the treatments have been?
Yeah, the full report was there, including, you know, what species are being impacted, how well they're being impacted, what they're seeing. There's maps as to where they treated and what's
So we
what's
get it,
still.
okay.
We got all of that.
Beautiful.
Jack, any questions?
No, none.
Joe?
No questions.
No. Sean?
No questions?
No questions.
Motion?
Move that we grant the extension request for 242-1592 Pleasant Street
Second.
for 1 year.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1544, extension request for 26 Main Street.
I think this is the one where we were talking about replanting the plants and.
This is the one.
Yeah, and it's because it expires in early May or mid-May, and the plants just haven't leafed out yet, so he can't do his report, so he wants 1 more year. I mean, ideally, I'd love to have it closed out immediately after he does that report, but we'll see what we can do.
This is what I was confusing with the other application.
Right, yeah. So I recommend we give him the 1 year.
Any questions?
They cooperating?
Yeah, I mean, the work was done, it's just dragged on a long time. I wish we could just close it out, but since we can't, we'll have to.
I remember there was an agreement to put some plantings.
Yeah, the plantings are in, and
Okay.
I have photos of all that, and so they do need to do the monitoring, but it's too early.
No more questions.
No questions.
Nobody's pulled any plans out and thrown them away.
Not that I've noticed.
No. It's the accused.
Almost nothing.
No questions.
No questions.
Motion?
I move that we grant the extension request for 242-1544 26 Main Street
For 1 year.
for 1 year.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next one
Oh,
is
it's correct.
242-158, PCLC request for 102 Bay Hill Road.
So, long awaited, but audience member.
This is
This is a non-jurisdictional lot on Bear Hill. We have many of them, as you know, but recommends partial to release this lot.
There can't be many parcels left.
Probably all the jurisdictional ones.
Yeah, because he's on a hill.
Yeah, I know.
No questions?
No questions.
No questions.
Motion?
Grant that we issue a partial certificate of compliance against 242-158, specific only to Lot 54A, also known as 102 Bay Hill Road.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You think I could pick it up tomorrow?
Yeah, we'll get it done first thing, so
Okay.
probably by 10-ish.
Because we're closing it.
Okay. It'll be ready at 10.
Take care of it.
See you.
Next one is 242-1626, modification request for 1101.
Oh, no, missed one.
Nice
See you.
one, I'm sorry. Academy Road, I'm sorry. Mr. Doyle. 242-1613, COC request for 190 Academy Road.
So as you recall, this was the work at the church. The majority of the work was outside of jurisdiction. There was minor, and the wetland is across the street, so there's no wetland markers or anything required. Heidi was out there today, and she does, there's photos, but I don't know necessarily, so there's a swale that runs along the back of the property, and for some reason, all the hay bales and some wood pallets got dumped there, so she's recommending the full and final COC as soon as they get that cleaned up.
Okay.
Does she recommend issuing and just holding it in abeyance?
I would just issue and hold it.
And hold it,
the,
okay.
the stuff is actually outside of jurisdiction. It's just, it's in the, let's see, it's in the swale that runs between the houses on Pleasant Street that but the work is all stabilized and everything looks good. And it was done in compliance with the plan.
Any questions, Jeff?
No.
Deb? No questions.
Pretty fine.
All set, George?
All set, yep.
And John?
All set?
All set. Motion. Motion to close.
Issue.
Issue, sorry.
Move that we issue a certificate of compliance for 2.2/16/13, and that we hold the distribution of that certificate in abeyance until evidence of our removal of those materials is presented.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Okay, now we'll try 242/16/26. Modification request for 11012.
So I was out at the site maybe a month ago. There was actually less area disturbed during slip lining than was originally proposed the first time they came in front of us to do the work. So when we went back to look at what was proposed to be replanted, they had a lot of plant material going into some very small areas. But while we were out there, you guys see their report? We noticed. Yeah, so there's some photos at the back there. At the back of the site, there was the plow guy who originally had the contract at National Grid was plowing into the buffer zone to the stream, and so that contractor is no longer with them, but they did clean up that area. It was a real mess, you'll see in the photos, and then now it's been all cleaned up, but they're proposing to take that fence and move it up gradient so that won't happen again, and then also plant behind the fence, something that wasn't originally proposed, so we'll have a better buffer to the stream and to the wetland, and likely less issues with plowing.
Yeah, hopefully less.
And trash.
Yeah, for the record, John Novak, Conoco Engineers and Scientists. This actually was the original submission for the impacts that we were going to be doing during the slip lining. Then we moved to foot access to the upstream, which was this plan, which is actually technically the approved plan set. And then this is now our proposed. So this is the area that if you look in the pictures that the plow guy dumped into, the fence is currently back here. We're trying to just tie into an existing fence post to an existing fence post, another 120 feet of fence, reestablish buffer, reestablish with, I believe we have a seed mix and then loam and seed and some plantings as well outside of the buffer. And then the second one is the slip line downstream. That's actually as-built of the erosion control area, so that you can see that from the original area, we've reduced the area of impact. Again, there was a lot of plantings proposed in this area. We've reduced it. They're actually more native species as opposed to what were originally proposed. And then again, the head wall repair, smaller footprint. There's sort of now a proposed fence, like a split rail fence, that's going to reestablish where the tree line used to be. And then there's plantings behind that. The grade has changed to a much gentler slope from the edge of the road to the top of the head wall as opposed to how it used to be. So that's actually, that whole area that's hatched, that's been loam and seeded, so we don't really want to take it back out because it was been stabilized for the entire, since last season, the fall season, so.
So the fence will be. if you
Yes,
show-
you'll see the
There's the
fence
fence.
right here, and it ties in the existing tree line to the existing tree line.
So it was really nice to meet out there with them, because I think they were proposing the fence at the top of the head wall, and then sort of seeing the grade and whatever, it made a lot more sense to pull it back near the road, and they can vegetate on the other side. I think, in hindsight, this is a much better plan than they had before. They also had a lot of introduced species, things that weren't growing out there, and being out there, we could kind of see what was already there, and so they're going to put back in more of what's growing out there, and a decent diversity. They didn't take out a lot of trees, and yet there was this proposal to put back all these trees.
If you look at the original submission, we located all of the trees, so there's a whole grouping in the downstream section that were removed, but they were anywhere from, a half-inch to an inch caliper that were like 3 or 4 feet tall, a lot of saplings, little suckers and stuff like that. So those did come out, but they're proposing, just a more diverse and, just better trees in that area. So, and we also had originally in the downstream had proposed loam and seed, and it's a pine straw, and it's pine mulch. Like it's a naturally wooded, so it would be really weird to introduce this nice grass strip right down to the river. So we're proposing to, go back. It's currently mulch. We would be adding, I think, 6, 12, 14 new plantings in the area, leaving the mulch in the area. So really the big change is pulling in the fence and giving back more of the buffer that we weren't ever, since it was foot access, we weren't going to end up doing any replication in that area. Now due to the wonderful snowplow issue, that we're going to try to eliminate that and give something back as well. So,
Jack?
No, sounds good to me.
No questions.
So, question to Jen, really. So letting this sit still for a while and see what takes hold on its own, rather than just looking at the science and trying to force plants to grow. You're letting them.
No, they're going to put in plantings, but they're going to put the types of
Different
things
types,
that are growing out there. So there was a lot of like high bush blueberry. There was
That's what I'm saying.
arrowwood.
Success rate's going to be that much
sweet
greater.
pepper bush, right? So there's no sense to bring choke cherry in there. I mean, who knows? Maybe it doesn't like that
Right.
soil or whatever. But so we just picked plants that we could already see
That we
growing
know is going
around
to take
that we
hold.
think they'll
Okay.
be much better off there.
Excellent.
And we didn't propose to plant any more white pines because everything is white pine.
Yeah.
So I think they picked some birches and a couple oaks so we can have a little diversity in the tree stand there.
And I appreciate the relocation of the fence, and I understand that sometimes you have to do difficult things with snow storage.
Well,
That was the result of this winter?
yeah, see, the issue is that is actually, the contractor had signed an agreement and that is not, if they're allowed to store snow in that general area, and then while they're cleaning, and then they're supposed to move it, they just push it down the hill. So when they did the site walk, when you look out there, it looks like it's normal, but because it drops so much off, and the contractor was terminated that after he was forced to remove the damage.
The fence relocation is correct. Is there any advantage to having to put a no storage sign on that fence?
Oh, I think we did
Or is
talk
there any-
about that, but they're in control of their own site. There's not going to be, there'll be a strip. We didn't put the fence right up to the edge of the parking lot because then someone's just going to knock it over. They still have to plow the area, but there is no room to store there now once they move the fence.
Okay, so you physically made it impossible.
Right.
Yeah, there are actually some Jersey barriers and a couple things, and then you only have maybe 10 feet from the back of the pavement.
So there are other alternatives?
Yeah, they actually have, I guess, on-site disposal in that general area where they either have metal that they dump in the bins to sort and stuff like that. So they have some stuff in the area that barriers from that edge of the parking out. So.
I'm all set.
John?
No questions.
No question.
Motion?
Motion that we grant the modification request for 242-1626-1101 Turnpike Street.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Another one, vote?
So they're trying to close out some old orders. They've got a nice long list. This one being 24284. And I did some good review of this, but it's such old ones are.
I do have 7 additional copies of the plan that we sent you guys today that had some of the modifications that you requested.
The ones that Heidi requested?
Yeah, so we have the wet area shown
Yep.
from the original plan for you guys.
So Heidi did up some aerials as well. They read this.
I think that's actually, that's pretty much what,
Is that what, oh, maybe
that's, yeah, I don't know.
Heidi might have printed them.
Yeah, she did.
Oh, she printed them when you sent them, but thank you.
All right.
I'm not sure that oh, here it is. Thank you. I'll put it in the file.
I got plenty more for you.
So I think Heidi's summary is basically that the paved area wound up being about twice the size of what was proposed, but according to the plan from that time, that extra paving wasn't in jurisdiction, and there also wasn't any stormwater requirements or anything like that. And then, since that time, that she believes that wet area is bigger, so it now probably casts some jurisdiction onto that paved area, but I guess hindsight's not really what this is all about. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why we like to get orders closed out in a reasonable amount of time, but it doesn't appear that the extra paving was anything that would have been a violation at the time of the filing.
This is 24284?
1979.
It's Enforcement Order 79, NOI 1980, so about 35 years old. So.
Yeah, I'm still in college.
We're going through a very extreme exercise with them trying to close out a lot of their orders, and this is one of the older ones, but not the oldest. So.
Jack, any questions?
No questions.
No questions. No. I don't want questions. Good motion?
Move that we grant the certificate of compliance for 242-84.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's unanimous. We have another one here. 242-1123.
This one's a lot easier. This is an invalid order of conditions. It was never started, and it was re-permitted under a different file.
Yeah, there was a sewer work that was completed under a
close
separate.
that out. Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually a certificate of compliance issued for this work underneath another number. So this work never commenced, but it did commence and was closed out afterwards. So.
I'm sure there are any questions, so why don't we just take a motion?
I move that we grant the certificate of compliance for 242-1123.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. All set.
All right, thank you much. And if we find anything from 1975, we'll be back.
Okay, next one is the enforcement order, 146/148 Main Street.
Sorry, I'm just trying to put this back together. So after viewing a video of sewage discharge, some of the commissioners saw it. Some of the commissioners have seen it in person. You asked me to issue an enforcement order requiring that discharge of that broken sewage cease. So that's what I ordered. There are two basically parties involved in the enforcement order. One actually uses the system, and the other party is the land upon which sewage discharge was occurring. So I issued to both parties. I subsequently, at the request of my boss, asked that those parties be present this evening, because it's almost impossible for me to ascertain whether the enforcement order is being adhered to, because I can't stand out there and see if the system's being used 24/7. I have stopped by on multiple occasions to observe, and I have not observed sewage discharge occurring at the time I'm there. But again, that's completely random. So I have several dates with photos when I've been there. But other than that, so they're here. At some point, you either need to ratify the enforcement order as it was drafted, or it's possible you may want to amend it, requiring some sort of solution to this issue, knowing that I can't be out there monitoring.
So let me just expand upon what Jen said. The commissioner was me who was out there, and what I found was a direct discharge of sewage to the ground and to crushed stone, finding its way into the ground, and in frozen conditions, probably likely flowing across flat areas adjacent to the resource area. This is the roadway that goes, the driveway of the roadway that goes across the top of the dam. It's a good pond. And the powerhouse in the headwork control structure is that stone building just downstream of that dam. And that's, and the pump station is adjacent to the east of that. So the area itself is surrounded by resource area. It's the brook itself, Kachikwick Brook. It's the BVW to some of the areas adjacent to that brook, out behind the parking lot of town hall. And in this pump station, it's an ejector type pump station whose wet well has uncapped, which are normally capped orifices that when it overflows, the pump can't keep up, so it just overflows. And it also has cracked piping, which spew sewage, to the ground. I can't say it does it all the time, can't say it does it on a regular basis, but I can tell you that I've seen it happen. What I also note, just for everybody to understand, is we have a jurisdictional ownership issue at play here, where we have an occupant of the building who has the enjoyment of the use of the pump, and we have the pump, which was supposedly installed by others and maintained by others, and is on the ground of land owned by others. So we really have an issue where the overflow is the violation, and the responsible party ultimately is unknown to us, other than the two people that we know about. And who's ultimately responsible, we don't know. So our take on it was, we do have a discharge. It's a violation, in my opinion. Not only it's a violation to the Wetlands Protection Act, it's an SSO, Sanitary Sewer Overflow. It's a violation of the Clean Water Act, and both of which are in our purview to deal with. And if we get the parties to the table and impress upon them the importance of dealing with this, that should be our goal, to have that happen as fast as possible. Not interested in engaging in an ownership issue. I mean, interested in engaging in a solution and hearing about it. That's how I brought this to Jen.
Thank you. Okay, so this is...
My name is Craig Smith. I'm the owner of 146 Main Street, which is colored in the red. I'm his attorney. So, I guess, what Joe said was somewhat, overall complete. I think what I was trying to show here, you say you're not trying to get into an issue of ownership, but I think ultimately that's really the problem here, is this system has been in failure since we purchased the property back in 1998. Prior to us, the town was in this building. When we moved into this building, we had the the understanding through the special permit that had been issued for this whole development, that the sewer, which was originally located in here, was to be the sewer pump, which serviced the condominium property, as well as this building, was located away from our building, located in what's now a tennis court area. Our understanding was that the special permit required it to be pumped across the river into the lift station in their courtyard. So when we purchased the building, there was a pump station there, no longer here. It was against the building. And turned the pumps on, they appeared to be working. So it wasn't until my contractor was out there doing work, because it required a good amount of renovation. He called me and says, hey, the pumps aren't working. So it took a series of months, literally, to figure out what the problem was while I was renovating this, to realize that the pumps weren't installed as required by the special permit. But in fact, they had been tied into the original 100-year-old force main. There was a 4-inch force main that used to service Osgood Mill and this building together, and had just been tied into it, just slapped, just kind of slapped together. In fact, the problem was ultimately that it goes up to Main Street in the sewer manhole on Main Street, and the sewer manhole had been completely clogged with about 12 inches of hydraulic cement. The pipe had been filled in because it was never intended to be operated that way. So I don't know how long that system was operating in that way where it wasn't installed. So I had a contractor install a clean out in there to try to clean out the line. And then he went into the Main Street manhole, and he chipped away at that until first of all, he had to find it. We had to find it with metal detector to realize that that's where it was even going. Chip away at it to the point where we could actually get flow going up into that. So that was the status from our standpoint. And since that date, we've been notifying the town that this has been a problem. We've been to ZBA, number of issues, and have gotten no response really from the town. But ultimately, I mean, my question is we've been notifying the town numerous occasions of this being a problem. I just want to know why I'm here, why I'm being punished.
We get a rebuttal from the gentleman.
My name is Chuck.
I'm not done. I was thinking that it would be a response.
Okay. Well, we like the both sides of it.
Not being punished, I don't want to use that word. I think what we have is a violation to the Wetlands Protection Act, a violation of the Clean Water Act through a direct SSO, sanitary sewer overflow, to waters of the nation. That's a violation. And there needs to be a responsible party. So knowing what, and when I met you on the site, I told you the outcome of this very well could be that we're going to go after both parties and to get the people to the table to understand who is responsible.
Okay.
So that's exactly the motivation here. What we have is some responsibility or some claim to ownership of, by at least the enjoyment of the pump by your entity on land owned by others, and an allegation, or maybe even some documentation that others might have some responsibility to have installed and maintained and operate that pump. None of that I'm going to get involved in. What I have to be involved in within our charge, and they made this clear, was discharge of sewerage to the grounds into the waters of the nation is a violation, and it has to stop. So that's the target.
It's been our target for numerous years to get this system
Clearly
fixed.
not a punishment.
It's been on numerous times over the years. It's failed because it's installed improper. It's never been permitted. There was never a modification of the special permit to install it that direction. There was never a permit to move it from here over to here. There's DEP requirements.
Isn't that the original setup, that building, that red building you own?
Mm-hmm.
Was that in place when the Osgood Mill was there alone?
Excuse me?
Was that building there when the Osgood Mill was there alone?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the Osgood Mill pumped into this pumping station that you're connected to?
No.
And your building didn't?
No. Ask the question again, because I don't think that's correct.
No, I'm trying to understand what the situation
The mill
is.
building.
The mill building
went across the river and
dumped into that pump station?
Yes.
And your building
Also-
connected to that pump station. Was that mill building and the building you now own, owned by the same owner at that time when that was created? Do you know?
When what was created?
I have no idea when that
Right,
pump
well,
station was
when-
first put in.
So the way that I own this, to be clear, is I own this through a ground lease, which is 2 feet around the building. And it was created by the prior owner.
Who was?
Well, as the developer.
The
The Osgood Mill owned it? At
The
one time?
developer.
Yes.
Both properties?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if they owned the property and they created the pump station to service both the mill and your building, and that pumped out to Main Street.
Mhm.
That was the original setup for those two structures. It
Well-
was all owned by the same
Right.
owner at that time.
And part of the special permit required that this system, that the pump building be raised and that the pumps be sent across the river into the
So
new lift
it was
station.
going to be, the arrangement was going to be changed.
Right.
At some point in time after, was this after you owned it? Or was
No, it
prior
was
to your
part
ownership?
of the whole development, original development, in which it was
Original
permitted.
With the original development, which means the Osgood, the entire redevelopment of that area, the additional buildings that were
Right.
built, as well as any renovations to your building or whatever was going to happen with that. So at that point in time, they were going to make a different way of handling the sewage. It was going to go out into the new construction area and be handled that way. And that never happened. That never got built.
It never happened, and at the time that this was transferred, the lease building was done prior to the development of the condominiums. This is the condominium document that created the condominium, and it states that the condominium is subject to this ground lease, and the pump system is shown not located against the building. So sometime after that,
So it
was
sounds to
changed.
me that that pump station and everything like that is on land that's owned by Osgood, by the
That is our
Sutton
thing.
Pond Development.
It's also outside of our 2-foot boundary. It's located about 3 feet.
I understand that, but you got a right to connect to it or something like that. So it seems like we've got the responsible parties here.
It sounds that way. I don't think we're equipped to make the determination who owns it.
Only halfway.
Well, can I interject something? If you're talking about responsible parties, right now, this whole concept of ownership, who is responsible for the pump station, is currently in litigation in a separate lawsuit. Really, one of the concerns that we had, and Mr. Smith has articulated it, besides reporting it to the town, interestingly enough, your town occupied his building prior to his ownership, and sometime while they were occupying it or immediately before, we don't know, we're pretty sure they knew or caused this pump station to be constructed. There are no permits on this pump station, okay? Or at least there are no permits at all prior to Mr. Smith getting involved
Yeah,
in
it's
this.
an allegation I'm not going to let you make from this room. The truth is...
Well, there's no filing of a permit.
Well,
Right.
I don't know, but I can tell you what we do
The
now.
mill existed, and that building existed. They had to get rid of the waste somehow. So that pump station was there to get rid of the waste.
There was a different pump station when this whole plan was drawn up. There was a pump station where the tennis courts now are, which served both of the complexes, basically the entire mill project. And it was a larger pump station which was designed to pump into a 4-inch forced main. Under the special permit, that pump station was raised, and it was raised. And instead of building the pump station that was supposed to be built, or the developer was supposed to build, they built the current pump station and attached it to the side of my client's building. And they built it prior to his ownership, basically sometime between 1993 and 1998 when he began occupying it. But the town did occupy it, and they used it. That's for sure. I mean, I don't know, nobody knows, apparently.
The town would probably lease the space.
They leased the building for $1 a year.
So they leased the space, they didn't own it.
Right.
Right.
Sean, being an attorney, it seems to me that the way this is developing is it's almost turning into we're overseeing a potential lawsuit. When what Joe's interested in is this direct discharge to wetlands.
Right.
So to me, my personal opinion is, one way to fix it is put a cease and desist order on the brick building, using of the...
That's what we did.
Well,
We said
can
the
I-
sewage discharges need to stop, whatever they...
Because we can't pick, because we're gonna open up...
But you also have the Osgood building dropping into it too.
So can I just comment on
They don't
something
pump
else?
into it.
So the issue too is that the town has already issued them an order to repair this in the pumping, and they haven't completed that work. Back in 2015, the board, the health inspector, issued an order to Sutton Pond Condominium to, get a copy of it here. It was issued on,
We don't want to get into
Not going to get to
whatever.
other boards, but...
No.
no, but I think it's important to see that it has been, and always has been, their issue. And they have taken
I know too much about
responsibility.
this. The other applicant, they did do a repair. So I mean, unless we're going to let both parties speak, this is just going to be a huge he said, they said.
Well-
I think we just need to be involved with our violation.
It just commented that the Osgood building itself does not discharge into this pump station.
Not anymore.
It does not at all.
No,
This is
I'm
entirely
trying to
their
understand things.
Yeah.
If you say it doesn't, then Sutton Pond Development doesn't use this pump station, doesn't discharge their waste in any way to this. The only party discharging to it is this of the 146. So that's the...
So the problem is, you know, I've been constantly hearing this back and forth for a number of years, but the fact of the matter is that there was an issue ordered to them, and I know Jennifer said that it was repaired, but it wasn't repaired. It was temporarily got to the point where it was pumping again. And then even in their order itself, it says, and I read, the directive does not alleviate the responsibility to address the regulatory and/or code issues that may remain relative to the pump house. And we notified them right after it was supposedly completed that it wasn't complete. There was no insulation in the building. It was going to freeze. There's no heat. We had to keep the door open because they never sealed off. They had red rags sealing off the pumps.
This is the part that I'm talking about. We're getting off the tangent here. But all we're interested in is Joe Lynch's book.
So
Is direct discharge into a wetland. Whose it is, how it's getting there.
Yeah, but the only party using it is this gentleman.
I don't want to go there.
And I don't have the ability. I don't have the ability to
We don't
repair
want to go
it.
there because we don't know what their legal rights are, and we should...
Well, let's hear from the other side.
It's irrelevant, because we can't vote against these guys.
So what are you
No,
going to do?
it's relevant to the fact that we issued an enforcement order to both parties. So I
Right,
think
they both
they
get to
deserve
address
to
it.
at least make a statement.
Can I ask just one other question then? In the enforcement order, it says something that I take offense to, and it states that, I can read it, excuse me. I don't know if you had it up.
A copy of
It says on March 22nd, Mr. Smith emailed a video showing the spraying cracked sewer pipe within a small shed adjacent to 146 Main Street. And it says, in addition, Mr. Smith discharged the system in the presence of a member of North Andover Conservation Commission. That is not a true statement. And that's in that order, and that never happened. I didn't do a single thing to discharge anything in the presence.
No, while I was there, the top of the wet well where the rags were overflowing. The pumps were not running. The cracks were visible, but the sewage was already coming out.
I didn't discharge or do anything to discharge that system in there. So I want to make that clear.
No, there was no deliberate action.
Well,
Nobody was
Well, somebody had to be using the system for it to be discharging. I mean, that's the truth of the
Yeah,
statement.
we've been asking this board, numerous boards, come out, take a look at it, and there's numerous letters in here stating that there is no problem, there is no problem. You and I both went out there, and it's clear that there's a problem.
There's no
But
question there's a problem, there's a violation.
Right, but there's been a history of the town not responding to this thing for years. And we've been bringing this up time and time and time
Internally,
again. And now
before
I'm
the
being penalized because I'm whistleblowing on this problem that has existed for numerous years.
No, let's be clear.
There's no permits.
And I explained it to you when I was out there. The
No design.
ultimate outcome was going to be an enforcement action, and whoever the responsible party is will ultimately need to deal with it. That might be you, and I said that. But on the same token, we recognize the ownership issue was less than clear, and that we know that the land ownership was others, and we went down that road and issued it to both. Our goal here is that there's no other players involved other than you two, I believe.
That's
Yeah,
not
we-
necessarily true.
Well, but we have a discharge that has to stop. If this was a town project, and we've done this before to town projects, not town projects, but town issues, we've issued a cease and desist order to our own public works department and got them to the table and found solutions. This, once you bring it to our attention, and Greg, not that I take offense to it, but I want to be clear. You make allegations that other departments have known about this and have quote-unquote done nothing. We don't act that way. When we're aware of something, we're going to do something about it. And it was not easy for me to convince my colleagues and convince Jen to take this thing seriously, because we knew it was a hot potato. But when I saw the volume of water that comes out of that thing with the cracked pipes, and it's going directly to the ground, and it's directly next to a wetland, it's a violation.
I don't...
And we're going to act on that. And how it is that impacts you, if it's you, I apologize, but someone has to solve it. And if it's you, then you have to solve it. And if it's others, they have to solve it. And if it's you guys collectively, it has to be solved.
It seems to
That's
me,
all we're looking to do.
who do you lease the property from?
It's a 100-year ground lease to another entity.
To another entity?
Yeah, which
Well,
is...
who's the entity?
It's Stone Pound Realty at this point. It's been
Who is Stone
transferred.
Pound Realty?
Which I have that as well. So I own the ground, the 2 feet around the building.
You
That's it.
own the lease.
You own a
I own
100-year
the
lease.
lease.
It's
You own the
practically the
lease.
same as
I
owning.
own the lease.
You have lease interest.
It's a 99-year ground lease, and he owns the structure on it. Can I just speak briefly? I don't want to try to match Mr. Smith in going through a lot of history here. It thinks there's litigation starting in '99. My name is Chuck Vanderlinden. I represent the trustees at Sutton Pond. Don Moriarty is the president of the board. Bill Good is on the board. We're not starting from scratch here. As Mr. Smith said, he bought this property in 97 or 98. He started litigation in 99. And he started litigation against my clients. They were involved in 5 years of litigation that resulted in a settlement agreement filed in the Superior Court. He was in Superior Court last Thursday seeking an order forcing us to do work on the system. That request was denied. So he's back in Superior Court. Less than a week ago, his request for an injunction against us was denied. We don't want there to be any improper discharge here, but the only responsible party is the party that's using that building, which is Mr. Smith. The litigation, and just to give you a little bit of history, the litigation in 99 resulted in a court settlement order in 04. That goes to 2 different arbitration hearings in 05 and 06. The only obligations of Sutton Pond after those orders, after the settlement and those arbitration awards, are some very narrow requests about installing 2 new pumps, getting a certain maintenance contract in place, which they've done. And Mr. Smith knows that there's a report from our engineer in 2012 that says everything's been done to comply with the arbitration orders, and everything has been done the way it was phrased. The pumping system has been engineered and designed to discharge to a municipal system in accordance with the town requirements and good engineering practice. What the settlement agreement says is once we're done with that, the system is his responsibility. So as we stand here today, it is our position. He is the one that has the capacity, the power to alter that system, to repair that system, to pump that system. but Sutton Pond doesn't have any further responsibility with regard to it. We don't want there to be any improper discharge either. And if that means pumping it or shutting it down, there ought to be a solution. There shouldn't be improper discharge onto our land.
Show me a permit.
Like I said previous, I don't want to get this commission in the middle of a litigation. I don't think that's what we want to be. We have a raw sewage issue being pumped into our open water system. I feel the only thing we have to do is have a cease and desist on the building until these people can get their act together and fix the problem. So
I'd be cautious to cease and desist. I'm not sure what you mean by cease and desist on the building. I think our jurisdiction begins and ends with the discharge of sewage to a buffer zone. So cease and desist the discharge to buffer zone, if that means, if anybody were to imply, that means stop using the system, therefore vacate the building, let them reach that decision. I think our limitation is stop the violation, which is the discharge. Cease and desist the discharge of sewage.
Very narrow.
Very narrow.
That's how I wrote it. The only other option would be to order it, to have it repaired, and again, not get involved in the who, but fix the cracked pipe. If that's where the discharge is coming from, it needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed in a certain amount of time. Or the system can't be used, but I think we have to be...
But I think that our enforcement order does that. If you stop discharging to the ground, you can make your own decision as the person benefited by that. Do I fix the system? Do I vacate the building? Do I stop using it? Let me make my own decision. But all I need to do is make sure I don't discharge to the ground.
So this really is an enforcement order. It's just a cease and desist.
Right, but
And that's how it's written.
no, it's an enforcement order. Cease and desist is an option on the enforcement order. So it strictly says,
We bring it in compliance.
we didn't,
You don't have that?
The enforcement order should be under...
It says, as such,
discharge into the wetlands.
hereby issuing this enforcement order requiring that the owners, users of the system cease and desist all activities that result in sewage discharge into jurisdictional areas. If repairs to the system or cleanup efforts require the alteration of land within the riverfront area, a filing with us may be required. Any future use of the system that results in a discharge to jurisdictional wetland resource areas will result in a $100 per day penalty. I have been out there. It's very difficult to, show up when there's a discharge, but I have been looking, but that's the part that gets a little...
I think the order is well-written within the jurisdiction of what we have, the limited jurisdiction we have.
Sounds like it is, yeah.
Now the question is, do we stay with both of them?
Well, I just have a question, out of curiosity partly. The order is very narrow in scope, but is there a dispute that there's a settlement agreement that says responsibility for this pumping station has been transferred by the settlement agreement?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
That's it. I don't have any questions. I like our order as proposed.
I may have given Jen good counsel, bad counsel, but my position was, I don't know who the heck it is. This is a unique ownership issue. The land being owned by a party and the infraction being on that land. We engaged the Sutton Pond Condo Trust. And the occupant and the beneficiary of the ownership of the building and the land lease in the area was the other party. We hit them both. Again, not trying to pick one side coming out of this. I think the enforcement order is accurately written to both parties who have ownership of the land, which is typically who we'll write it against. We don't write it against the tenant. We typically write it against the landowner.
But it's the landowner.
The landowner. So, if the onus is for the parties to walk away and say, look, we're going to clarify for the commission who's the recipient of this enforcement order, I think they bring that to us. But I don't think I've heard that tonight. I've heard things that suggest that...
It sounds like both parties should be the recipient of the enforcement order.
That's what got it initial. That's what got it initial.
Because
And I did receive a letter
that the pump station is on.
I got a letter that was addressed to the planning department that Mr. Smith's attorney intends to appeal the enforcement order. He didn't appeal it to Superior Court. I don't know if he intends to, but that's where it needs to be appealed to as well.
But how can Sutton Pond abide by this order when they have no control?
That's right.
Well, that's their defense against any action.
I think they need to document that with us for us to take into consideration. I've heard that tonight.
What was that?
I've seen the
Well, this
settlement
meeting's on the
agreement, but
record.
they're arguing about it in court, that I'm not sure that it means anything, but the discharge, the system's not going to discharge as a result of anything Sutton Pond Condominiums is going to do, because
Right.
they're not connected to it.
Well, it seems to me that the discharge is on the land owned by Sutton Pond. So, as the landowner,
landowners.
our enforcement order goes against them. If they have issues with who's discharging it onto them, they can bring suit against those people. That we don't have to get involved in it.
Just be heard on that issue.
Sure.
I have shared with different town departments, including this one, the settlement order, the settlement agreement, rather, has a phrase in it, after we've done our work, it says, thereafter, Stone Mill Realty Trust shall be responsible for the maintenance, repair, and replacement of the same and all components thereto. We don't have any further obligation.
That was 2004?
That's right. So
Okay.
they were in court on Thursday
Greg,
trying to
let me
say,
answer.
based on
That's not
this,
defense.
order these guys to do work. And the court said, no, I will not.
That was on a temp...
It was a request for preliminary injunction.
Right, I mean, the
That's right.
standard is very
Okay.
different than if it was...
I agree it's different.
It is,
but,
and really the way the court handled it was different, but that's really not part of what we're discussing tonight. If you're talking about ownership, the issue with the settlement agreement, if you want to get into litigation issues, is we
Nope.
dispute, well, but it has to do with whose responsibility it is. The settlement agreement, we can't dispute what the settlement agreement says because it's on paper, and I agree with that. However, what we do dispute is that they actually performed what they were supposed to perform, and that has been the source of the litigation for the past 16 years. Okay?
Just so we're clear, though, the board should know it's our position that we are not a responsible party because the agreement said after that point in time, they're the ones that are responsible for the system. I understand it's on our land. We can't change that. We don't benefit from their use. We don't use that system.
No, but if
Trustees
discharge
are
is on
lucky
your
enough to have
land,
part of it on their
then
land.
the only people we can go after are the people who own the property that the
Or who are
discharge-
using the system.
Yeah, and we are going after them as well. So going after both
So I
sides.
understand. what
So
you're saying.
you got a defense, for what you're telling me.
We have a lot of disputes.
My recommendation would be to ratify the enforcement order
Can I hear
as
the language
drafted.
one more time, please?
Yeah. So I cite about the video and the commissioner seeing the actual discharge, and then I cite the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw saying no person shall engage in the following activities, blah, blah, blah. As such, the North Andover Conservation Department, on behalf of the NACC, because I issue these things ahead of time, is hereby issuing this enforcement order requiring that the owners, users of the system, cease and desist all activities that result in sewage discharge into jurisdictional resource areas. If repairs to the... Okay.
What I wanted to hear.
To Mr. Smith's concern with the language about causing the discharge, if you want to clarify what it is I saw, that the wet well was overflowing of liquid and discharging water at that time. It was not pumping at that time, but the flow of sewage out of the top of that,
Okay,
the
so-
holes in the wet well were
I can just say then, in addition, a member of the North Andover Conservation Commission reported seeing effluent leaking from the building into the riverfront area associated with Kachikwick Brook, and just take out the discharging statement? Okay.
You need us to ratify that, or are we good?
Yeah, motion to ratify.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
So I assume if a violation of the order is observed, that we would issue fines and tickets to both parties?
No, to the one causing the discharge. That's what that language just said, that we ratify.
Okay.
The repair is
So if the only party that's discharging into the dry well
That's the one that's
is
responsible.
them, 146.
Everybody understands that, right?
Yep, I
There's no
got it.
ambiguity.
Okay.
Yeah.
For your time.
So we'll re-sign and I'll reissue that tomorrow as amended.
Are you going to get back to Adam?
Yes.
Okay.
So, on
They
to
have some more work to
decisions.
do.
So the hillside first, Jen?
Who would you like to do first?
Oh, yeah, 2 4 2 16 75 and 76. Right next to each other.
Okay, so 75, these are, well, they're largely the same. So the all-important language in this was about the wall. So confirm the resource area delineation. 44, Al wanted to make sure there was silt fence.
I don't think they're looking for a 2 foot by 2 foot wall, which is a square
No.
wall. That's a masonry wall.
So with a dry laid field stone wall.
Field stone wall, period. Don't put the dimensions in.
Well, it has to be 2 feet high and 2 feet wide. No matter how.
Who the heck demands that? That's not necessary.
Well, again,
That's Al's
it goes back to
concept.
pile of rocks.
That came back to
It needs to be general.
Meadowwood 4.
I can say
when
generally.
the wall was a pile of
It
pebbles.
needs to be like a farmer's wall, like you see along the sides of the roads, like that.
Approximately 2 feet by.
What do you mean the kids are throwing the wall around?
Approximately.
They're throwing the wall at each other?
Throwing the wall at each other.
Handful.
Yeah, if you make it with little stones, yeah.
That's what they do.
Where it came from.
That's why you gotta give them a little direction.
Something, I might have, I forget if I emailed it to you, but he had submitted language that said similar to other, to farmers' walls on Chestnut
Yeah.
Street or something.
Yeah,
No,
I
put that
don't
in.
agree to that. I don't,
Okay, I'll just put
Why don't you like
approximately 2
farmers'
feet by
walls?
2 feet.
no, I do. I just don't like it when he compares it to one on Chestnut Street that I don't have a picture of. or
Right,
something
yeah.
in front of me. I don't know.
I wasn't comfortable with that either, but.
No, you tried any of
Let's
the
see-
roads
let's see it,
in
you know?
North Andover.
Chestnut Street, there'll be a 6 foot wall.
Exactly. On such and such a date. I mean, come on, let's.
My only point was that, a 2 foot by 2 foot masonry wall requires a stonemason to build it, because you need somebody that's talented.
Right.
And that's what people picture. And I don't think that's necessary.
No,
You get somebody that any contractor can build, or you can go out and build yourself by lugging the heavy stones, as long as the stones are heavy enough that they're not going to be picked up by the kids and thrown.
Yeah.
All right.
Last meeting, we had 45 minutes on what a farmer's wall is, so I think the applicant knows what we're looking at.
Right, so we have the requirement for us to get the as-built foundation in there, crushed stone construction entrance, there's dewatering details, no stockpiling within 50 feet, and then all our general, 75 is lot 1, or? I don't know. No, this is lot 2. We should probably have something in there about the maintenance of the path to the pond. They had that 6 foot. I'll add that.
Mowed annually.
At the meeting, he said they were just going to leave it as grass and mow it.
Right,
Yeah.
but it shows on the plan and it goes into the 25, so we're saying he can mow that strip. I just want to document that in here.
Yeah.
So, other than that, that's that one.
Any questions?
No.
Motion.
I move that we issue the certificate of compliance of the order of conditions for 242-1675 as drafted
Amended.
and amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Okay, so lot 1 is 7.6, and that one does not have a path to the wetland. It does have a 6 foot break in the stone wall, but there's no path or anything back there, so. So this is just the same one. I'll add approximately to the 2 foot by 2 foot. And then this is exactly the same order.
Any questions?
Nope.
No.
Motion?
I move that we issue the order of conditions for 242-1676 as drafted and amended.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Next one is 242-1671. Turnpike, this is Turnpike.
Yep.
So you'll see there's a note in there, I just have to revise the reference to the plan that was submitted today.
31.
16. Oh, I just have a note to myself to have Donna check to see if there's any additional filings for this property. There's basically a shack on it, so I'm assuming that there's not, but in which case I'll delete that condition.
That's 31.
Number 31. I would be surprised.
That also is over there.
Right.
10,500 following.
Right, so that's for 10,500 would be the stormwater, the parking lot, and the storage shed.
Okay. Anything else?
So we do have, condition 47 is the ability to review the SWIP, all the stormwater management conditions, including the O&M will be attached to the order and recorded. They didn't update their plant list last time I checked, so I did put a note in 64 that their plants be native, especially in the rain garden and the buffer zone. I guess landscape-wise, it's probably not as big of an issue. That's about it.
It'd be the nicest property within about a half-mile radius.
It will be a nice entrance to town.
Yeah. Okay, any questions? No. Motion?
Move that we issue these order of conditions for 242-1671 as drafted in the amendment.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that's unanimous. Jen has to show me one thing, right?
Yeah, I can show you offline. I meant to show you this morning.
Okay, so we can adjourn.
So we can adjourn, yes.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?